Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to represent the people of Nebraska. 1 Peter 4:10 says, "As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's grace." Thank you, Lord, for creating us with a purpose. Help us to recognize our gifts and use them wisely to serve the people of Nebraska. Help us to remember to be good stewards of your grace as we discuss issues and make decisions here. We pray today for understanding to make decisions that honor you and that benefit our state. Today we pray that you watch over and give your grace to our governor and his staff, each senator and our legislative staff, and the Supreme Court and judicial staff. We ask you to watch over and protect our families and our state and national leaders. We pray for protection for first responders and the military who keep us safe and free. We pray that we will be God-fearing and recognize we are accountable to you for each decision we make. As we honor you, may you continue to bless the people in the great state of Nebraska. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I recognize Senator Hardin for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I call to order the 11th day of the 108th Legislature, first special session. Senators, please record your presence. Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please record.
There's quorum present, Mr. President.
Are there any corrections for the journal?
I have no corrections this morning.
Are
sir.
there any messages, reports, or announcements?
There are none.
Speaker Arch, you are recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to give the body some pre-notice of what I would anticipate for the remainder of this week, the next few days. Of course, the problem we all are faced with, and we have from the very beginning, is we don't know outcomes as we move through the week. But in order to provide the body with as much notice as possible, I'm going to make some assumptions as to the outcome, so bear with me. Today through Friday, we will be convening at 9 a.m. and taking a 1-hour lunch break from 12 to 1. We will not be having a dinner break. Adjournment time will be anywhere between 7 and 9 p.m. contingent on that day's debate. I do intend for us to meet on Saturday. It should be a short day, convening at 9, perhaps adjourning at 3, as we work through the bills. So I just wanted to give everybody at least the tentative schedule as I see it going for the rest of the week. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Clerk, please proceed to the first item on the agenda.
Mr. President, General File Legislative Bill 34. First of all, a priority motion. Senator Linehan would move to indefinitely postpone the bill pursuant to Rule 6, Section 3F.
Senator Brewer, you are recognized to open on LB 34.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, Nebraska. We are here to talk about LB 34. I will start by opening on the bill, the original bill, as presented to the committee, and then you'll get a chance to hear how it morphs from that into the bill that we'll actually discuss here today. So with that, LB 34 was a concept from almost 7 years ago. It was originally LB 576. And we came to a decision on this bill for a number of reasons. First off, property taxes were too high. Surprise, surprise. Property taxes shouldn't go up, in theory. Property taxes have been a very old and difficult problem that we have faced here in the legislature and have struggled to come up with a solution. And probably most importantly, people's patience have ran out, and it's time to act. LB 34, if it becomes law, would cap property taxes at 2024 levels and stay that way for 4 years. If passed, LB 34 would be the fail-safe clock to try and fix the problem of property taxes. Keep in mind, this is the original bill that I'm describing to you now. So what we would do is we would take things and freeze them for 4 years. Doesn't mean it has to stay 4 years. What it means is it gives a clock, a time, an opportunity to figure out what right looks like. The legislature could pass a bill to unfreeze those and move forward at any time. This bill would not lower property tax as written and presented to the committee. The idea was that through all of our efforts to try and fix property tax, all we have done is manage to slow the increase at best. This bill would force us to come up with a solution or answer to all of the 600 local units of government on why we cannot come up with a solution. So this is simply a 4-year freeze. With that, I will close on LB 34. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. Senator Linehan, you're recognized to open on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. I know it's going to be a complicated and difficult day. So I think we should just get to business, so I will pull that motion.
Debate. With objection, debate continued. You are recognized to continue opening on your motion.
Okay, I'm not good at filibustering bills, people. So anybody want to jump in here and help me with what I'm supposed to do next? I want to get to a discussion about the real subject before us. And by looking at the board, I think that most people want to get to that discussion. So what I would suggest is I'll just talk about the amendment that we're trying to get to. LB AM 73 to LB 34 includes a local government cap, which has been worked on all summer between the league and NACO. It was CPI. We changed it to state and local government consumption expenditures. This is something that Senator Bostar brought to us. It was something that the cities and counties thought more reflected what they actually spend. As I heard more than once in hearings, they don't buy toasters, they buy cement. So and the initials are SLCE, state or local government consumption expenditures, or zero if we have where there's no inflation. There are still exclusions to the cap, such as approved bonds, declared emergencies, use of unused budget authority, an imminent and significant threat to public safety, an override by the voters, and public safety. So if you'll recall, firemen, policemen, county attorneys, public defenders, anything to do with public safety is excluded from the cap. School district property tax credit fund is included. There will be a credit assessed against property taxes levied and not valuations. This is originally in LB1. The credit will apply to the front end of the property tax statement. This is for the first year. So for the first year, we're already too far along into the school year, into the budgeting process. So for the first year, the 1107 additional money we come up with, whether it's exemptions from sales tax or appropriations money we have, the Appropriations Committee will be talking about later this week, that all goes to the front of the property tax statement people will get in January. So no more, I got to write a check to pay my property taxes, to claim it on my income taxes to get it back. And most importantly, it will be going to the people that aren't claiming it now. So it'll be more fair. The natural resource districts, and I forget who's, I wish I had, I need to know whose these bills are. And the it's Senator Wayne, is he here? Yes. Senator Wayne, would you yield to a question?
Senator Wayne, would you yield to a question?
Yes.
So the way, I don't remember exactly, you brought a bill to Revenue Committee trying to have the natural resource districts take their property tax off the property tax. They still get a tax.
Correct.
It would work just like the first property tax credit statement. The state would start paying for the natural resource districts,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay, so what that means is, in the first year, the state, just like we did on the first property tax credit, or what I call Tier 1, be a credit of 50% of taxes paid to the natural resource districts, or NRDs. In tax year 25, it would be a 75% credit, and in 26, it would be 100% credit. So as we've talked about many times, there's so many different taxing entities on that statement. So if we can take some of them off. So we're not affecting them. They still have their boards. They still have their taxing authority. We're just going to pay the bill. And Senator Wayne, I have another question, if you would yield, please.
Senator Wayne, would you yield to a question?
Yes.
Senator Wayne, you had brought, and I'm sorry, Senator Wayne, I didn't give you a heads up on this. You had brought a bill to the Revenue Committee concerning state reimbursement of jails, correct?
Yes.
So in those conversations, we talked about, and Senator McKinney's been all over this, and this is part of our conversation, we're going to build a new prison, right?
Correct.
But isn't the problem, even if we build a new prison, we're just replacing the prison we already have. We're not building any more capacity, right?
Correct.
Well, that was an argument, but the
Correct.
goal is not to build more capacity, but to update the prison.
Correct.
So part of the reason you brought this bill is you've had discussions with the administration, so have I, that if we could use the resources that are spread all over the state, we could better explain how that would help as far as populations of jails.
So the short-term solution is to reimburse the counties some funding, because over 90 to 95% of the people who are sitting in county jails are charged with state crimes. So if we're the ones passing those state crimes, we should be not putting that burden on the county. The long-term solution is to look at coordination of all of our county jails and our prison system to figure out how to better serve people. So if in Western Nebraska, there is a need for a more drug treatment center versus a prison, because we started flowing in dollars, we could start having conversations with those county officials about maybe there's a drug treatment center that we can put more people in through across the state of Nebraska in this particular area. And we can build more efficiencies around our corrections and our prison system instead of having the counties bear all those costs.
Thank you, Senator Wayne, thank you. So that's where the county jail reimbursement came from. Thank you, Senator Wayne. Would Senator Blood yield to a question?
Senator Blood, would you yield to a question?
I will.
Senator Blood, part of this amendment includes a bill you brought to the Revenue Committee. Would you like to explain what that is?
Sure. I was trying to find ways to generate revenue so we wouldn't have to tax all the things that were originally given to us, trying to protect the middle class. And what I brought forward was a tax or a fee similar to what Colorado has. It was a 27-cent fee that if you have items that are taxable already, this does not apply to non-taxable items. So when you got those fearful emails about groceries and medications, it does not apply, that it allowed us to charge the company a 27-cent flat fee, again, as they do in Colorado. And if they want, they can pay it or they can pass it on to the consumer. We did a lot of research. We found that in Colorado, that businesses did not close down, that people did not stop ordering. In fact, it was quite the opposite, much as what happened with Omaha's restaurant tax. And that we also provided exemptions for both small businesses that make under $500,000 a year, as well as for new businesses.
Thank you very much, Senator Blood. So my thought process on that is if you're going to have something delivered to your door, and I think in the committee amendment, and this was probably in your bill too, we exempted medicine and food, right? You're not, if you have food.
Medicine and food were already exempted because they're not currently taxed in Nebraska.
So, but if I go this weekend, if we get any weekend, and I go on Amazon and I buy a hair dryer and shampoo, and I figure out how to have it all in one box, that it'd be, in your bill, it's 27 cents.
Right.
Delivery
It's not
fee.
a percentage. It's not an excise tax. It is a flat fee. And we did the math, and for
1
the
minute.
average consumer, it's about $14 a year.
Thank you very much, Senator Blade. Senator Kauth, would you yield to question?
Senator Kauth, would you yield to a question?
Yes.
You brought a bill to the floor that was regarding a look back on homestead, right?
Correct.
Can you explain what that bill does and the cost?
Sure. So this past session, a bill was brought to protect people who are on homestead exemption from getting kicked off their homestead exemptions strictly because of the valuation rises. As I've been going out talking with my constituents, I found several people who in 21, 22, and 22, 23, and 24 had already been kicked off because their valuations had risen so high. So this is strictly a look back to say we're going to extend that back 3 years. The fiscal note on it was $136,000, and that is just to change things within the computer
That's your
system.
time,
Thank
Senator.
you.
Thank you, Senator Kauth and Linehan. Mr. Clerk with a motion.
Mr. President, Senator Wayne would move to recess the body until 10:30 a.m.
Speaker Arch, you're recognized to speak to the motion to recess.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm unclear on the purpose strategy of this. I do not support this. I think we need to continue our debate. I would ask that you vote no on this motion.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Speaker Arch. There's been a request to place the House under call. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay to place the House under call. Record, Mr. Clerk.
22 ayes, 8 nays, place House under call, Mr. President.
The House is under call. Senators, please record your presence. Those unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. Senators Vargas and Holleran, please return to the chamber and record your presence. The House is under call. All unexcused members are now present. There's been a request for a roll call reverse order on the motion to recess. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Wishart, not voting. Senator Wayne, voting yes. Senator Walls, not voting. Senator Von Gillern, voting no. Senator Vargas, voting no. Senator Slama, voting no. Senator Sanders, voting no. Senator Reapy, voting no. Senator Raybold, voting no. Senator Merman, voting no. Senator Mosier, voting no. Senator Meyer, voting no. Senator McKinney, voting yes. Senator McDonald, voting yes. Senator Lowe, voting no. Senator Lippincott, voting no. Senator Linehan, not voting. Senator Kauth, voting no. Senator Jacobson, voting no. Senator Ibaugh, voting no. Senator Hunt, Senator Hughes, voting no. Senator Holcroft, voting no. Senator Hardin, voting no. Senator Hansen, voting no. Senator Holleran, voting no. Senator Frederickson, voting no. Senator Erdman, voting yes. Senator Dungan, voting no. Senator Dover, voting no. Senator Dorn, voting no. Senator DeKay, voting no. Senator DeBoer, voting no. Senator Day, Senator Conrad, voting no. Senator Clements, voting no. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, voting no. Senator John Kavanaugh, voting no. Senator Brewer, voting no. Senator Brandt, voting no. Senator Bostelman, voting no. Senator Bostar, voting no. Senator Bosson, voting no. Senator Blood, voting no. Senator Ballard, voting no. Senator Armendariz, voting no. Senator Arch, voting no. Senator Albright, voting no. Senator Aguilar, voting no. Vote is 4 ayes, 40 nays, Mr. President, to recess the body.
The motion fails. Returning to the queue, Senators. I raise the call. Senator Slama, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I rise today to oppose LB 34 as amended. When you examine this plan, let's keep it simple. Today's bill costs $1.8 billion. $1.2 billion comes from existing property tax relief. $600 million from new taxes. It does not touch valuations. As far as we've been told so far, without the addition of LB2, it does not cut spending either. I'm going to get up later today to break these numbers down more, I'm sure, but my message for you today is this. Speaker Arch has outlined that a bill which fails on cloture can come back up to 3 times. So if you vote against cloture today, you are not voting to kill this bill. A vote against cloture is simply a message that we step back and take the time necessary to make this bill better. As a Republican, I cannot support increasing taxes to tell people we've tried to cut taxes in other ways. It does not make sense. If you are not comfortable with that, do not vote for LB 34. 2/3 of this money is not new tax relief. At most, these numbers represent less than a 25% cut in property taxes, if you assume all else to be true. 2/3 of that is existing relief, so that takes you down to a less than 10% cut, which costs $1.8 billion. If you are not comfortable with that, do not vote for this bill. Moreover, the math is inherently flawed. A large chunk of that new tax revenue is based on a flawed projection on sin tax revenue. The projection used so far projects a 50% 2-year increase in sin tax revenue. No revenue modeling best practices recommend predicting sin tax revenue increases, period, much less a 50% increase in sin tax revenue over the course of 2 years. It is not real. If you are not comfortable with that, do not vote for this bill. The math is even more flawed in other areas. We're kicking millions of dollars of this bill towards the general fund, which are not going towards property tax relief. If you are not comfortable with that, do not vote for this bill. And the math matters. And why is that? Because we're throwing billions in new state funding obligations for education into this plan without numbers that work. Governor Pillen can harp all he wants that he had town halls across the state, but will he come to the town hall in your rural district announcing that your rural school will be consolidating? If you're not comfortable with that, do not vote for this bill. What this bill does is creates a monster that you'll need to deal with later, so next year or the year after, to fully fund. Sure, we've taken out taxes on things like ag inputs and machinery, but this bill simply is not enough to cover the new obligations created. So you will inevitably face the question next year, do you raise taxes on ag inputs, or do you shut down the Class C or Class D school in your district? There is no right answer to that question, but if you're not comfortable with that question being asked, do not vote for this bill. Nebraska has the 6th highest per capita tax burden in the United States. This bill does not cut that. In fact, it increases our state's overall tax base by $600 million. Unless you believe Nebraska can tax its way out of a tax crisis, do not vote for this bill. This bill raises taxes disproportionately on the poorest taxpayers in our state for the sake of providing disproportionately high payouts to our state's wealthiest landowners. It's not designed to keep little old ladies in their homes or help family farmers in crisis. This is a bill to benefit millionaires and billionaires. If you are not comfortable with that, do not vote for this bill.
1 minute.
If you harbor any doubts about this bill today, do not just vote for cloture to kick this bill to select. We're operating under special rules and protocols in this special session, so providing a vote for cloture is your stamp of approval on this bill. I'll have more time later on to talk about more of the structural problems with this bill, but my overall message, unless you are 100% confident with every line in this 122-page bill, do not vote for it today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Slama. Senator Kauth, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of AM 73 on LB 34. The tax shift has been going one direction for decades, with special interest exemptions forcing that tax burden on property owners. Politicians seem to view property owners as their own special piggy bank. Buying a home should be a main component of the American dream. It's the single biggest investment most people make. Our property taxes are robbing hardworking Americans of their dreams. Our property taxes are keeping people from taking those steps out of renting and into ownership. If you're not voting for this bill, you're actually pulling the ladder up behind you and deliberately keeping people out of home ownership. Our taxes are that high. They are hurting people. As I go door to door talking with people in my district, I'm encouraging them to send me letters, and I'm going to read a few of those today. From a constituent, I'm being taxed and insured out of my home after 25 years. The assessed value keeps increasing. I protest, but lose because I can't prove my home was not recently remodeled like the homes in the area that are selling. I've won a few times over the years, but it takes a tremendous amount of time and effort, and then the value is greatly increased the following year. OPS doesn't lower their levy, so I pay more property tax. The insurance company increases a premium because of the increase in assessed value. If we sell, we would simply trade for a smaller home for the same cost because of the increase in interest rates. I'm not sure the specifics of the tax plan, but I fully support switching to higher sales tax and lower property taxes. Next constituent. For reference, we moved into our home in Armbrust Acres in 1994, 30 years ago this coming October. We are lifelong Omaha residents, but have seen our home's property valuation increase over the years along with the property tax. As a comparison, and it gives me the breakdown, in 2021, their valuation was $337,000. By 2024, 4 short years, $461,000. Their taxes are now $7,607. In 2020, we purchased a home on the Lake of the Ozarks, Osage Beach, Missouri. Current real estate valuation close to $750,000. Our property tax this year on that property was $1,616. In the next few years, we will be downsizing in Omaha, most likely to a condo, and making the Missouri property our primary residence. We have family and many friends in the Omaha area, so we'll maintain a residence here, but property taxes will be one of the driving factors in our move. And by the way, sales tax in Osage Beach, Missouri is around 10%. The next one. The assessed value of my property has increased by 59% over the last 5 years, including 22% this past year. The associated property taxes have increased accordingly and make it increasingly more difficult to envision how I will be able to afford my home as I near retirement. The increased value of my home is meaningless while I still own it, as I am not realizing any profit or gain. Many homes, comparable sales, have sold and resold in my neighborhood over the last 10 years, providing ample data to the Douglas County Assessor's Office to justify their valuations. While my house has more value to the taxers of Douglas County and the state of Nebraska, the increased tax burden is increasingly cumbersome to us as homeowners. This special session, I introduced LR 6CA, which is a constitutional amendment based on Prop 13 out of California that would tax property.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President, at 1.5% of the sale price. That would make it a fixed cost that you could bank on. We wouldn't have these surprises. I would like to see that this session. If not, it's coming back next session. And finally, I wanted to share a couple of thoughts as I think they're relevant to the discussion from a constituent. We moved to Elkhorn in 2021 from Boise, Idaho. The main reason was to get closer to our family. In planning for the move, which was also in conjunction with our retirement, we knew property taxes would be almost double what they were in Idaho for a home of similar value. We estimated $10,000 in property taxes based on research. 3 years later, our taxes are now $15,000, and we have to find another $5,000 a year we had not planned for. While values have gone up dramatically in Idaho, the taxes don't, as they lower the mill level accordingly.
That's your time,
Thank
Senator.
you, Mr. President.
Senator Jacobson, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I just want to start by saying thank you to Governor Pillen for having the courage to pull a group together this summer that was a great cross-section of the legislature to work on this problem and to try to create a plan, or at least a framework of a plan, that we could bring back here at a special session and try to deal with this issue of property taxes. I can tell you that there is no question in my District 42, the property taxes are the highest issue. They are the biggest issue by far of anything that I talked to when I met with people knocking on doors 2 years ago, and as I see them at fairs and shows, that is their issue. I can tell you that the working group thought about a lot of things. And they said, do we want to go big or do we want to go small? And they said, let's go big. You can always cut that back. So what came after the failure of LB 388 and the regular session was LB 1, which had everything probably and the kitchen sink in it, with the idea that the Revenue Committee, after having hearings, would work on that bill and figure out how to streamline it, how to shape it, and how to bring something that could be passed. And that's what they've continued to do. So I want to also say thank you to the Revenue Committee, because they were all the Revenue Committee members were also part of the working group. And they sat through all the hearings, they listened to the input from the second house, and they have worked on 3 different renditions and now brought LB 34. What I'm hopeful of is that we'll actually debate the bill today. I'm hopeful that we will not spend our time today holding blocking motions, priority motions here to keep any amendments from being brought to the floor to legitimately fix the bill. We're going to hear from people that are saying, I want to cut property taxes. I've always been in favor of cutting property taxes, but this isn't the right bill. Okay, then let's fix this bill. Bring your ideas, bring your amendments. But those aren't going to be able to be brought if we're going to sit here with priority motions that can't be pulled and we block any legitimate amendments from coming to the floor to fix it. That's not coming here in good faith. That's not coming here and trying to fix the problem. This is trying to avoid fixing the problem and then take cheap shots at the governor and the Revenue Committee and others who might be supporting the need for a change. Is this bill perfect? Far from it. There are a lot of things in this bill I don't support. But I can tell you that I know at the end of the day, if we're going to make hard decisions, these decisions are not going to please everyone. In fact, they're not going to please everyone. But ultimately, we've got to do something about the problem. Senator Kauth is exactly right. We've run through the numbers before. What's happened over the years is this legislature, over the years, the Nebraska Legislature has approved property or sales tax exemptions, one after another, after another, after another. And they went home to their constituents and said, we cut your taxes. We cut your sales taxes. But what did they actually do? They shifted those sales taxes to property taxpayers. So today, back in 2023, property taxpayers cumulatively across the state spent $5.3 billion in property taxes. That same year, we collected $2.3 billion in sales taxes.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. We need to think about that balance. We need to think about that balance by repealing some of those previous exemptions, raising that revenue, and using it to reduce property taxes. Property taxes are in crisis. We are losing people from this state because of property taxes. If this isn't the right bill, then bring amendments today to fix it. Let's engage in good dialogue. Let's don't engage in name calling and trying to just stop anything from happening and we all go home with nothing. Let's try to fix the problem. If there's a problem with the bill, let's fix it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Lowe, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. I would like to commend the Revenue Committee and Senator Linehan for dealing with this issue. And I have told the governor and others that if this bill passes, it will be the best bill for my family and myself since I've been here at the legislature. But it has also been emailed to me that retirees are going to leave Nebraska if we don't pass substantial property tax relief. Well, in Forbes, which came out last week, by an article from Laura Begley Bloom, new report names the best state to retire. Hint, it's not Florida. And she continues on, when you think about retirement, you might picture sunny Florida with its warm climate and retirement communities. But it's not the best state to retire. According to a new report from Bankrate, which just issued its annual ranking for the best states to retire in the United States, to create a comprehensive analysis. Bankrate used data from several sources, including Tax Foundation, the Council for Community and Economic Research, the U.S. Census Bureau, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association. States were evaluated across 5 categories, including affordability, overall well-being, quality of cost of health care, weather, and crime. The winner? Delaware. I don't hear many people saying they're going to leave Nebraska for Delaware, but it is the best state to retire in, according to Forbes. I will continue. Following Delaware is West Virginia. I don't hear many people saying they were going to retire to West Virginia when they list places they're going to retire. And Georgia took 3rd place. Well, now you're getting into warmer climate. I could kind of see that, but I don't ever hear of anybody say, I'm going to move to Georgia to retire. South Carolina ranked 4th. It made a big leap this last year from 19th. Missouri rounded up in the top 5. Now, I do hear people saying that they're going to retire to Missouri. But it made the list thanks to its affordable metrics such as cost of living and property taxes. That we do here. But on the downside, it has difficulties with healthcare quality. Do we think about that as we're getting ready to retire? Yes, we do. Overall well-being and crime. Yeah, we do think about crime when we're thinking about retiring. Iowa, which was the best state to retire in 23, dropped down to 9th place due to higher cost of living. Now, isn't that what we're talking about with some of these taxes? Now I'd like to go through the states from the bottom up. Now we've gone through the top 5, so we'll start at the bottom now and see where Nebraska places. Number 50, Alaska. Brr, I can understand. New York, that I can understand. Washington, they have moderate climate there. California, what great climate they have there, but we don't hear people saying, I'm going to move to California because of the tax situation there. Massachusetts. Locally, Colorado ranks 44th. I hear people say, oh, well, I'm going to move to Colorado. They got low property taxes, but they have other issues there. Maryland is 43rd. Texas is 42nd. Way down in 42nd, I hear people, I'm moving to Texas. Minnesota, I can understand that. Nevada, for those that like a little gaming. Vermont, 39th. New Hampshire. Thank you. 38th is New Hampshire. Michigan, Arizona, 36th place. New Jersey, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. We're getting south. Utah, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maine, Montana are all below Nebraska. Montana, a very conservative state. You'd think people would want to move there. North Carolina, Ohio, New Mexico, Arkansas, Indiana, South Dakota, Kentucky, Wisconsin, Tennessee, Oregon, Hawaii, Illinois, Virginia, Idaho, and Kansas, all rate below Nebraska. And number 13 is Nebraska. We are well in the top 25 of great places to retire. So when people say they're going to move from Nebraska because it's unaffordable, it is very affordable for retirees and their health and crime. Things to think about when you think about retiring.
Thank you,
Lieutenant
Senator.
Governor.
Senator John Kavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. So I rise in support of the IPP and opposed to the bill. And for those who may be confused, you can debate basically any part of the bill, even though we're on an IPP. The reason I support the IPP is because I oppose many portions of the bill. I appreciate Senator Lowe's comments, and after I get off the mic, I'll probably ask him for a copy of that article because I did find that very interesting. I appreciate Senator Slama's comments. I appreciate a lot of comments from folks so far, and I really do appreciate the work of the Revenue Committee. As I've said before, a lot of us watched the committee hearings on TV, but we weren't in the room for all that time, and so it was a real marathon, and so it's quite a testament, I think, to the work that their stamina, the work they did. I participated in town halls in both Omaha and Lincoln, the two biggest communities, and the number one takeaway was folks do want some sort of property tax relief, but they don't want a massive tax shift. And Senator Slama correctly pointed out that what we have before us is a bill that will increase taxes by $600 and some million. That has to come out of somebody's pocket. And one of the biggest problems I have with this bill is that it disproportionately takes that increased revenue and gives it to massive landowners, folks who maybe don't even live in the state of Nebraska. So when we're talking about people will make up for the property tax cut with additional sales tax purchases, some of those folks don't live here and are not going to be spending any money. So they're just going to derive the windfall. Not to tout my own bill, but I did bring a bill that addresses that issue, which was a universal homestead exemption for the first $100,000. And though it does have a price tag, it was targeted relief. It was essentially $2,200 to every homeowner in my district. And I said at that hearing that that bill, paired with a bill like Senator McKinney's rental assistance, is the type of relief Nebraskans are looking for. Targeted to folks who live here, work here, own property here, or aspire to own property here. And it costs less than the types of ideas that shift massive amounts of money out of their pockets into the pockets of large landowners. So that's the essence of my opposition here. I did, just to pick one section of the bill that demonstrates this, I believe it's section 52 and 53, which if you are looking at your bill, which we received yesterday, it looks like about page 72, there's a section in which the state will be capturing an additional 12% of cities, counties, municipalities, local option sales tax. So we all understand folks pay, the state collects 5.5% sales tax, and then the cities have an option to collect an additional amount. So the city of Omaha, I think, collects about $1.50 cents, which I'm told accounts for about $250 million in the city of Omaha. City of Omaha has that source of revenue and property taxes. So what's going to happen going forward if we start capturing 12% of Omaha's local option sales tax? Where are they going to make up that additional loss in revenue? They're going to have to make it up on the backs of property taxpayers in Omaha. Senator Jacobson was right about that. Whenever we give a property sales tax cut exemption, that has to be made up somewhere. In this case, the state will be extracting 12% of Omaha's local option sales tax to put into property tax relief for large landowners in the rest of the state. And Omaha is going to have to make that up, thank you, Mr. President, on the backs of its property taxpayers or cut services. And we can have a bigger conversation about what cutting services looks like. And I know the committee recognized the importance of public safety, police and fire, but there's a lot more to that as well. But the fundamental objection I have is the extractive nature, regressive nature of this proposal to increase revenue on the backs of working people, the poorest, the least able to make those decisions and changes and move to those other states in the interest of folks who maybe don't even live here, to give a giant windfall tax cut. So again, you can debate sections of the bill, just talked about a specific section while we're on the IPP.
That's your time.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Albright, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Nebraskans. I'll tell you what, this is the perfect storm. And if we don't take advantage while we're here in special session to do what we've promised every person that we've knocked on their door or visited on the telephone about their property taxes, this was the same 8 years ago as it is today. Have we made some progress? Yes. But even today, with what this has whittled down to, Governor Pillen had a very, very bold plan with a lot of great ideas. But as sitting in the revenue department and listening to 67 bills, and we listened to everyone, from those who could afford the property taxes and don't complain about it, to those who are renting and on fixed incomes and have other issues with this plan. But if not this plan, what plan? We have worked with everyone across the board. I was with the governor last year and this year on his working teams to try to come to a resolution that would fit most all property taxpayers in the state of Nebraska. But a lot of people didn't want to play in the sandbox. So LB1 went to the wayside just as quick as we heard it. So now, as a legislative body, it is for us to go forward and do the best we can for Nebraskans, for all of us. You know, when the valuations first came out, and I was down here, of course, for a meeting, and I couldn't believe the number of people who had for sale signs in their yards just in the city of Lincoln. And driving home from here, you know, up north, people are having to make tough decisions, folks. I mean, even not just your property tax, I mean, our insurance bill at the farm went from $6,400 twice a year to $7,200 twice a year. I mean, everyone has to start making some hard decisions about what you're going to do with your homes, with your families. Is this the right place to be? I'm not going to say that everybody's going to leave Nebraska because of that, because we all love it here. But if we all love it here, we all have to figure out how we can be a part of the solution and not run away from it. Senator Linehan, my hat goes off to her. I mean, I've worked with her for 8 years now, and all of us had the same concerns coming in 8 years ago that we still have today. And that doesn't go away because we have 49 people to convince that one bill's better than the other, or we have to continue to make tweaks to get where we're at. I just really feel like with the time that we have spent and the energy that we've put into this, there was a call for special session and it needed to happen this year. A lot of us are leaving. A lot of you will be left to take care of this. But I'll tell you what, next year would be a pretty easy year for all of you if you pass something like this and you understand that the number one reason that we're here talking about this is spending. It's not about the valuations, folks, because everybody wants their property to increase in valuation so that you can continue to be able to buy things and to be able to sell your property for more than you bought it for. All of those things come into play. But we're here because levies are not being lowered. We don't hold the line when valuations go up. People must lower their levies for us to be able to capitalize on what we need to do every day in our own homes, on our own farms, in our houses. And I understand that, you know, we went into this talking about valuations and we end up deciding to fully fund schools because it was never meant to be that property taxes were to be funding schools. The state is to be funding schools. The state is to be taking care of our schools. We have to also take a look at all the different bonds that are up in the last couple of elections have failed miserably because thanks to Senator Hansen, those pink cards are working. People are understanding because they aren't going to city council meetings, they aren't going to school board meetings, they aren't going to county board meetings, but they're understanding why their taxes are continuing to go up because they keep saying yes to everything. Folks,
that's your time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Albright. Senator Dungan, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I do rise today in favor of the motion to indefinitely postpone LB 34, and I do rise opposed to LB 34. I've only spoken on the mic once so far this special session because I try very hard to make sure when I'm talking it's about what's specifically on the board. Kind of speaking to what Senator Jacobson had referenced and Senator Kavanaugh, we can debate whatever's on the board, and so I think we are having already a substantive debate about this, and I appreciate that. When I last spoke on the mic, I sort of tried to bifurcate process and content. And I previously spoke a little bit about the issues that I had with regards to the process that brought us here today and some of the concerns that have been brought to me by constituents with regards to the special session. But today, I'm happy to say we can finally debate the content of the bill. Obviously, LB 34 is not in and of itself the entirety of what's being talked about here. We're talking about an AM that has been filed by the Revenue Committee, and that's AM, I believe, 73 to LB 34. And in that contains the broad outlines of what we're all talking about. That AM did come out of the Revenue Committee yesterday, and I was the sole no vote on that. And I've received a number of emails talking about, why that no vote was and asking for some explanation. So, I think we're going to have plenty of time today to have a conversation about this bill. But I want to start by sort of centering the conversation over what my broad objections are to the plan contained in AM, 73. At the heart of this bill, what we see is a plan that has laudable goals, which is to reduce property tax, which we all agree is something we should do, but it's achieved through mechanisms that I think are inherently problematic. Back when we were debating LB 388 last year, one of the main objections that myself and others had was that the entire bill was based off of an expansion of sales and use tax, meaning that you were essentially going to pay more taxes on more things in an effort to shift that tax burden from property tax onto sales tax. Because if you're going to bring down your property taxes, you got to pay for it somehow. And at one point, that proposal had an increase in the sales tax. At another point, it was a broadening of the base. But what I have said this entire time, and what I continue to hold true to, is that if we are going to broaden the sales and use tax base, it must be accompanied by bringing that rate down, and not just a small amount, but bringing the sales tax rate down to a level that is actually going to be helpful to your everyday Nebraskan who's going to the store and buying clothes for their 3 kids getting ready for school. We want to make sure that if we are broadening the base to have a fairer tax policy, that we do so in a way that actually helps our middle income and our low income earners, because those are the people that the vast majority of us were sent here to represent. And so throughout the conversation that happened this interim up until the special session, as a member of the Revenue Committee, I was privy to a number of those conversations and invited to participate, which I really appreciate because I think we had some robust discussions. But my sort of guiding principle in that has continued to be that we cannot pay for property tax on the backs of a sales and use tax expansion. And what we find in AM 73 is exactly that. It is a broadening of the sales and use tax base, meaning that you, Nebraskans, are going to be paying more taxes on more things. And I just can't get behind that. I too went to town halls, or the town hall that we hosted here in Lincoln, where we had about 300 people show up. And I had a number of people from my district at that town hall. And they all got up and said, again, property taxes are an issue. They agreed that it's something we need to continue to address. But having at that point reviewed what the proposal was.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. They said, we don't want to pay more taxes just to shift the burden onto us everyday people. And so I'm here today representing my constituents. I'm here today representing a district that has almost 50% renters who, based on anything in this plan, aren't going to see a big benefit. I understand there are portions in here that were put into the bill in an effort to sort of alleviate or offset some of the harm, but the very inclusion of those parts of the bill is indicative that the heart of AM 73 is problematic for renters and middle-income workers. And so, colleagues, I think we're going to have a really good, robust discussion about this today, but please know, we all agree this is a problem, but we do have principled objections to the way that this plan has been structured. And again, I've been a part of these conversations. I have expressed this belief previously. Last year, I expressed this belief this interim. I continue to express it this year. So it's not as though this is a new belief.
That's your time.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Duncan. Senator Clemens, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of LB 34 and the amendment from the Revenue Committee. We do have a property tax crisis, and I think it was really well pointed out. The governor had a survey done and sent in a presentation from that pollster with the survey results, and it turns out that 82% of Nebraskans believe that property taxes here are too high, but 35% said that sales taxes are too high. And it's a lot of detail, but it was bipartisan. Didn't matter political party. People in Nebraska across the board know that property taxes are too high. So I agree that a special session was needed. I thank Governor Pillen for calling it. Looking at our population, it's not growing. While states with lower property tax and higher sales tax are growing, this bill has limited the new sales taxes to items that we can choose to pay. Whereas when you have a house and you have property tax, you don't get to choose to pay as long as you want to keep your house. So I think because the legislature has limited support for school funding, it has shifted it to local property tax, as our school aid has been fairly flat. So I think it is time to correct that problem, and we appreciate the governor. He had a lot of items. I was on the task force, a lot of items that he proposed to add sales tax to, and he was willing to remove those that were more harmful. But what we're left with is ones that I believe are acceptable. With that, I yield the rest of my time to Senator Linehan.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Senator Linehan, you have 2 minutes and 35 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're talking a lot about how these taxes are going to affect low-income people. I'm just going to read from the bill what we're talking about taxing on sales tax that we don't have now. Gross income received from tattoo and body modification. Now, let's see, is that a need or a want? Because that was one of our priorities. We need this, or we'd like to have it. So we can't tax body tattooing, really? I mean, I'm doing this partially because people at home will be astounded at what we don't tax. The gross income received for cleaning clothes, when you take your clothes to the cleaners. I'm guessing most people think they do pay sales tax when you take your clothes to cleaners. My children are all smarter than I am. They hardly ever buy anything that needs to go to the cleaners because it has become rather expensive. Gross income received for chartered road vehicles, including limousines and similar luxury vehicles. That's something that low-income people do every day, rent a limousine. Gross income received for travel agency service. Another thing that I think a lot of moderate and low-income people use.
1 minute.
Travel agencies. When I get back up again, this is my very special one because I know the fiscal note is so wrong. Income received for swimming pool cleaning and maintenance. Because I am ignorant enough to have one of those. And I'm telling you, the fiscal note's several, if not millions off, hundreds, thousands off. We don't ask people who are lucky enough to have a pool, who they're expensive, for their maintenance and the labor to pay sales tax on it. Really? It's ridiculous. And the other argument we're going to get up, can't pay sales tax on pop and candy. If you did a survey in Nebraska and asked people if they paid sales tax on pop and candy, they would say yes. Well, part of the reason is because if you buy pop with ice, like, you go to the distributor, you put ice in the cup and you put your Diet Coke in there, you pay sales tax on that. But if you go and you pull it out of the cooler, you don't pay sales tax.
That's your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Senator Brandt, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Senator Brewer, Senator Linehan, the Revenue Committee, Governor Pillen for calling a special session on property taxes to solve a huge Nebraska problem, and LB 34 is the answer. Most importantly, and this never gets said, I would like to thank all the property taxpayers in Nebraska who are enduring unending tax increases year after year. Your ask for help is being answered today. I do not believe there is any senator in the room today who is blind to the fact that property taxes for their constituents are out of control. Today is the day we, as elected senators, can do something meaningful for our constituents. There has been a lot of talk and emails that this bill helps the wealthy. I ask, just who is wealthy? Is it just the people who own property, houses, businesses, and ag land? If so, I can report that the 25% of all Nebraskans who own property want and welcome all Nebraskans to own property. The young families who rent should have a shot at home ownership. This bill enables that by lowering property taxes. One of the drumbeats I have heard for 6 years is the state needs to pay more of the costs for our schools. I wholeheartedly agree. And I am confused by all the emails I receive saying the state should not pay more for school funding. So if not the state, then who? We all know who will be forced to pick up the bill: property taxpayers. LB 34 fixes this by dropping the levy for all schools to a 40-cent levy lid from $1.05, with the state funding the difference. An over 60% reduction in school asking of property taxpayers. LB 34 will make this happen, and it needs to happen, as most of the schools in my district, LD 32, have an annual cost per student of over $20,000. Think of that. 9,000 students in District 32 times $20,000 a year and rising. Who is going to pay for ever increasing education costs? Finally, I would like to address all the sky is falling emails about the modest increases in sales taxes by eliminating exemptions. Being asked to pay a nickel more for a can of pop to help fund our schools while helping people stay in their houses seems more than reasonable. I support LB 34 and yield the rest of my time to Senator Von Gillern.
Thank you, Senator Brandt. Senator Von Gillern, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've got some longer comments that I'll make when I come up in the queue here, and I always write my comments and then I listen to the opposition and then I end up with more material than I could possibly use. So I'll spend this time to just rebut a few things. And I'm going to make a comment repeatedly, and I guess I don't know which camera is on right now, but I want to address Nebraskans and not necessarily the body. And when I address the citizens of Nebraska, I want you to hear one thing. If this body does nothing here this week, you will pay more in property taxes next year. That is a fact. Valuations continue to rise. Taxes, spending continues to rise. If we do nothing this week, if this body does not have the courage to do something this week, you will pay more in property taxes next year. Senator Dungan said, I just can't support this. Well, Senator Dungan, what can you support to bring relief to your constituents and the people of Nebraska? I'm really tired of the obstructionist mentality that says we can't do this, we can't do that, but nobody has a plan. There were some great plans that were brought, but no means to pay for any of them. That doesn't work. Those of us who have a home budget, those of us who run a business, you know you can't just build a plan to spend money and do great things unless you can figure out where that money's coming from. So all of that rings pretty hollow to me. Nebraskans, hear this. You will pay more in property taxes this week if this body does not act. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Von Gillern. Senator Hardin, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our Legislative Research Office does a marvelous job. Every year they put out a wonderful document and they take a look at all of the different legislative districts, all 49 of them. And I'm looking at the one from this last biennium, and it's wonderful. I'm looking at my own District 48, and it covers statistics. It's full of things that you can view at a glance. Shows you the land area in square miles, and of course the counties that are there, and the breakdown of political affiliation, the population, and the educational attainment, and the health of the people, income and poverty, housing, employment. There are just so many things that in just a few minutes you can really get a pretty good idea through the statistics of what goes on in Scottsbluff, Banner, and Kimball County. And then it's fascinating to pick out a category and then to kind of quickly flip through the entire booklet. Because if you're interested in a category, you can see what all 49 of them look like by looking in the same place as they go flipping by, and quickly get an idea of where you stand. What it unfortunately does not tell, because that's the nature of statistics, is the actual stories that people live. Those stories happen when individuals walk up to you at a place like the Old West Balloon Fest in Mitchell, Nebraska this weekend. I was there to watch 34 balloons at least inflate, but unfortunately the weather didn't cooperate. But we still had lots of people out in the wind and the rain. We were dreaming of balloons, but guess what we talked about instead? They managed to find the topic of property taxes. And since I was an easy target as the senator there, guess what? We discussed a whole bunch. And we got to hear stories. It's the stories about these people and these statistics that come to life. One that comes to mind was from a family where the gentleman said, "I'm the fourth generation and I will be failing because we will not be able to pass this farm along. The margins are too thin. It's too steep of a climb." And so what I am doing this week is I'm figuring out how to put together the words to share the realities with the next generation, that there won't be a farm life for them. They can feel it coming. They've sensed it for a long time. But this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. And so it's the real stories that you hear from people that happen in the vernacular that bring tears and heartbreak to their experience. And it's not just farmers. It's the folks who are in town and have jobs, or more seriously, in my view, is a lot of those folks who work those jobs for decades. They now have to put more money aside monthly in order to pay those twice-a-year tax bills than they originally had to pay for their mortgage. And they can't keep up with it. One of our neighbors had a garage sale in the last several days. It was their final garage sale because they're moving away. I would like to yield the rest of my time to Senator Erdman.
Senator Erdman, you have 1 minute.
Okay, I'll be brief. Thank you, Mr. President. I listened to Senator Von Gillerin say nobody has a plan. That's not a true statement. It's not even close. Senator Wayne had a plan. Several others had a plan. I have one. Had it for several years. And I know some of you are just here a couple of years and you may not have had a chance to read it or look at it, but it is a solution. It is the answer. And I will say this, and you can use it. This will be a decrease in the increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Meyer, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess listening to the dialogue here this morning and what I read in the press, sound bites absolutely never tell the whole story. The first soundbite this morning, all of the benefits of LB 34 will go to large property tax payers in Nebraska, many of which live out of state. I know there's probably quite a number of folks in the 41st District. If they're watching this at home, they are getting madder and madder and madder. And the ones that aren't watching are out irrigating, putting up hay, trying to keep their farms going. We have none of those large, massive landowners in the 41st District. So I somewhat take offense to that characterization that all benefits are going to that level of property owners. We have many, many medium and small farmers in the 41st District, many of which bought their first farm with a Farmers Home Administration loan, struggled to pay the taxes through the 80s and early 90s, and finally, after farming for, say, 40 years, their farm is paid for. That's their retirement. But they pay taxes on it twice a year, every year. They don't buy new equipment, they buy used equipment. So the characterization that all property owners are receiving massive benefits just absolutely is not true. The second soundbite that never tells the whole story is, this is a tax shift. Well, how many times do you want to say that? If you say that 100 times over and over again, you're just playing a game. This is a tax shift. This is a tax shift. This is a tax shift. Well, where were all the people that are saying this over the last 20 years as the shift was occurring slowly and steadily, faster some years than others, onto people who were working hard to pay for a home, to pay for a farm, to pay for an acreage that they could call their own and build equity in? Why was there no effort made through previous administrations to stop that shift as it was shifting on to property tax owners? The figures tell the story. 2.3 million in sales taxes, 3.4 million in income taxes, 5.3 million in real estate taxes, and growing exponentially with no sign of stoppage. Senator Von Gillern is absolutely correct. If we do nothing, your taxes on your farm, on your home, on your acreage, on your business, small business, struggling to make ends meet in rural Nebraska, your real estate taxes will go up next year and the year after and the year after that. It's almost comical when we talk about trying to control valuations. Is that really what you want? I worked in a bank for a couple years after college in the 70s, before the horrible 80s occurred, and people were trying to build their net worth. Hopefully inflation would work if they were able to buy a farm. In the 80s, that all went backwards, needless to say.
1 minute.
So when people buy a home, they buy it at, say, $100,000. They would hope in 10 years that they have to move and they sell it for $200,000. That's great. Trying to control and keep down valuations is not a workable situation. To decouple the taxes they pay on that from the valuation is a much better approach. And the third soundbite that never tells the whole story is, I'm a fiscal conservative. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. It's one thing to say it. It's another thing to be able to carry that out. Does that mean you're not going to change anything, even though the current paradigm is not working for a lot of Nebraskans? It's just kind of hollow words, because it doesn't mean anything to me. So I ask you to support LB 34. There's a lot of good things in it that help a lot of Nebraskans. The earned income tax credit, the sales tax removal on
That's your time,
household
Senator.
electricity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Meyer. Senator Von Gillern, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I speak in error, I am the first to own it and admit it. And Senator, my comments earlier were intended to be addressed that people had not brought solutions to those previously who had testified here in the room, not Senator Erdman, who's been passionate and diligent in his proposals regarding property tax, and several others. But I did just do a quick search, and I was picking on Senator John Kavanaugh a little bit in my thoughts here. He did bring an option to pay for property tax relief. It was the elimination of the appropriation for the Perkins County Canal, a project that was passed by this legislature, I believe 2 years ago, and is critically important to agriculture and industry and to the preservation of the way of life here in Nebraska. I pulled up Senator Dungan on the side. I don't see that he introduced any bills this special session. Senator Conrad did introduce a bill that would have been an income tax bill, and which would have had a means to pay for property tax, but is also a shift, which I'm continue to hear is not what we're here for, is to shift taxes. But regardless of that, I rise in support of LB 34 as amended by AM 73. There's been a lot of work that's gone into this. Is it perfect? No. Was LB 388 last year perfect? No. Was the governor's bill brought on behalf of the governor, LB 1, perfect? No, but God bless him. He threw everything on the table for us to pick and choose from. And he's taken darts and spears for that. And I appreciate his leadership in that he did that and then surrendered it to the legislative body to do what it is that we're supposed to do here. And that is assemble a bill that's good for the people of Nebraska. He has not applied pressure. His office has not applied pressure, said you need to do everything that we had in LB1. He said this is a palette of many things that you can pick and choose and select from to make a bill that works for the state. And I respect he and his office for the way that they've handled that. We originally chose LB9 as a vehicle, and it's interesting that procedural matters and motions and trickery that takes place regarding bills. And I'm appreciative that we haven't seen much of that today, and I hope that we don't. But LB9 was bogged down by dilatory motions. And, you know, the rules are there. The rules are what the rules are. And the rules can be used to advance a bill or to constrict a bill. And you can't complain about the rules when they're used against you. You need to figure out how to use them to advance your issue. And that's one of the things we need to learn to do here. Again, AM 73 isn't perfect, but it does do some important things. First of all, and most importantly, that we heard repeatedly and over and over and over again in the working groups, is that it controls spending. It sets spending caps on local taxing authorities. I did a spreadsheet this last year that overlaid spending, property tax taking against the rate of inflation in the United States, in the state of Nebraska. And property tax taking exceeded inflation by 21%. Now, we've come to realize in the hearings and through some other things that counties and cities spend money on different things than you and I do. Counties and cities don't buy groceries, they don't buy appliances, they don't buy consumer items, and that's what led us to utilize a different spending index in this bill. And we actually adopted in this bill the state and local consumption expenditure and gross investment personal change, which is basically an index that is geared towards the types of items that local governments and municipalities purchase. It's asphalt and steel and concrete and rock and heavy equipment and vehicles for their purposes. Spending caps are critically important.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. What's also critically important for everyone to hear is that those spending caps have stopgaps in them. Based on a vote of the people, those spending gaps can be overridden. So every citizen has a say in how much property tax taking can happen in their municipality. It's growth plus the index and that allows for spending in the cities. So and also there's a floor built into the bill to where cities and counties and other taxing authorities cannot take less than they did the previous year. So they will be made whole. So the risk to those entities is pretty small. I'll hold the rest of my comments for my next time up on the mic. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Von Gilleren. Senator DeBoer, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to say that property tax is a problem. Property tax is a problem in the state, not just in the cities, not just in the rural areas. Property tax is a problem throughout the state, not just for poor people, but for middle income people as well. It's a problem. And now we have this bill that's before us today, which is what I'm going to talk about. And we haven't even had 24 hours to look at it. This is the bill. We haven't had 24 hours to look at it. It's 120 some pages. I haven't even gotten through it all the way since we got it. That after last Thursday when I got the amendment and I stayed up all night and I asked questions and I got made a little fun of for staying up all night reading the amendment. And it's not that I'm complaining, it's that if you're reading a bill in the middle of the night, you're probably not doing your best work. This is a bold, big bill. Nothing like this has been tried on this level, but there's probably a reason for that. It collapses under its own weight. This isn't an everything bagel. This is an everything bagel. You look through this, you've got garlic and sun-dried tomato, Asiago cheese, rosemary, cinnamon and sugar, chocolate sprinkles, anchovy paste, peppermint, bleach. This isn't a recipe. It's the first 23 pages of the cookbook. And we don't know if somewhere in the middle of it, there isn't a recipe for rat poisoning. If we pass this thing, we might have to rip up our statute books and start all over with a new document. And I wouldn't blame Micah up in bill drafting if he didn't throw a couple of lines in there somewhere to disband the legislature, because as much as we've been overworking him. So I'll take a second to say thank you to Micah. But this was the assignment. I don't like that we're doing this in special session, but if you know me, you know I'm a fixer, so you put a problem before me, I try to figure out what the answer is to that problem. It really annoys people, because sometimes I try to make bad bills better that they'd just like to kill. So I've been trying. I was on the super secret, not secret at all group this summer. I was in weekend meetings all last weekend. But this is a difficult problem. Property taxes are a difficult problem. My freshman year, well, my second freshman year, back when I still didn't realize you were a freshman for 2 years, I had a bill to try to fix property taxes. Then Senator Groney called me out on the floor, and he called me a naive freshman and several other even more unflattering things. Later, he came up to me and he apologized in the hallway for being a little over the top. And I said it was okay, but he better never meet my mom in a dark alley. But the darndest thing, he was right. After a year of working on it, and with all kinds of help, doing listening sessions to all sorts of people, I didn't come up with a plan that worked. It's not that it isn't easy to fix the property tax problem. I think that fixing it may not actually be possible, fixing it all the way. I've been studying what other states do. They don't fix the property tax problem. They rework it every 10 to 20 years.
1 minute.
Because houses go up in value. It's pretty consistent. It's why home ownership is a sound financial idea despite the upkeep. Homes appreciate in value, so property taxes go up. So you have to adjust it continuously, and we haven't found the solution yet. This bill, this thing that we got yesterday afternoon, this is the love tax, because the tax is dating. The puppy tax, nail clips and grooming, the weight loss program tax, the everything you bought on Amazon last year tax, the sober rides home from the bar tax, the dry cleaning and other laundry services, whatever that means, the home honey roasted peanuts and baking sprinkles and Gatorade tax, the kids ballet and old ladies in their basement teaching piano tax. For farmers, this is the soil testing.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. Senator Dover, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Governor Pillen for his determined focus on property tax relief. Also thank Luann Lanahan and the Revenue Committee for their work on solving this massive issue. We can all agree we need property tax relief. The question is, how are we going to do that? First, I'm a fiscal conservative. To me, that means I believe if taxes are too high, then what we need to do is cut spending. I also believe that caps on spending, when spending far exceeds the income of working Nebraskans. Caps and cuts, that is a fiscal conservative. When you hear we need to raise taxes to cut taxes, that just seems strange to me. And why now? With reduced taxes, when we need to reduce taxes now, and at the same time we want to increase with over 50 new taxes and raise the cost to business. I'll just briefly look at some of the things here. So basically, we're going to increase the cost of temp help services to business. I've used those quite often. We all know what the employment market is like. Marketing and telemarketing services, telephone answering services. We don't need to raise the cost of business. And I'll tell you one thing. If you look at the towns in my district, and you go down Main Street, there's a lot of empty windows. And I'll tell you the one thing, and I'll guarantee I've talked to people, they're thinking they're aging. Is now the time to maybe close the doors? Is it really worth the small margin that they're getting? And we want to increase cost of them. I think it's a bad time. I also say with the cost of housing out of control and people can't afford it, why would we raise the cost of real estate agents' commissions? Why would we raise the cost of appraisals that are involved in the closing process, loan broker services, real estate management services? Why are we raising the cost of housing and also on land surveying services? As I said, I had property tax relief town halls in Norfolk, Pierce, Battle Creek, and Madison. And what I heard was, yes, we need property tax relief, but not by taxing others in a tax shift. One thing I'd say too is, so I remember when I was young and we had 4 children, and believe it or not, I went to work for a minimum wage. I sold real estate in evenings and weekends just to make the bills. But I remember when all of a sudden I didn't have to buy diapers. I remember when I made my student loan. I remember when we didn't have to buy formula. I remember, and there's those who'll say no one's going to know when someone pays a sales tax or something or not. But I'll guarantee you, when it comes before the next paycheck and they are out of money now, and I guess they're not going to be able to go out on that date, go out and get the kids ice cream and things like that. We are thinking, a lot of us have disposable income, but I don't think we're considering those that don't have. There are families with no disposable income. By the time the next check comes, it's already spent. And I guess the one thing I would say this too is, if this bill would pass, for the first time, renters would be paying property tax twice. Once their landlord's property tax, and second, others' property's tax. So now, if you own no property, you can actually say you're paying property tax twice. And why are we doing this special session? We're going to make the largest tax policy shift in over a half a century. And we're going to do this in a matter of days. That concerns me. I do want property tax relief. And we need to do this during the 90-day session and not now. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator Dover. Senator Bostelman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I oppose the IPP motion. What we're talking about is property tax relief for everyone. And I think I disagree with Senator Dover that renters actually will be paying more. I disagree with that. And I would like to, maybe we'll have a discussion off the mic about that, but I don't understand that. It does benefit all landowners. What the shift has been over that time that you talk about has gone to property taxes. Has gone to landowners, has gone to ag. Our taxes have leapfrogged and surged to a point that it's unsustainable for a for a farmer or a rancher now, or a homeowner. I have an elderly person. I've talked about this many times on the mic. In Ithaca, Nebraska. She's retired. She's on Social Security. She's owned her home for her majority of her life. She has a part-time job to get by. But you know what? The taxes are so high now. She doesn't. She's too much income for homestead exemption, and she can't afford tax on her home. Property tax. Really, folks. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about exemptions and things. You know what? The zoos collect taxes, and they keep it. And they keep it. Why aren't we talking about zoos? The tax that goes to the zoos, why isn't that part of what we're talking about? The zoos tax you and then they keep it. If you look on page 78 and 79 of the amendment, that talks exactly how there's going to be a reduction, how the state kicks in funding over several years. So right now, most of us are paying the $1.05. If whatever the levy is from your school is $1.05, whatever portion that is what you're paying. What it does over the years, it goes to from $1.05, then the state kicks in 65 cents and 70 cents, and then 75 cents to lower your taxes. The other thing that we need to make sure we do, which the bill does, what the amendment does, and if we don't pass, we need to do. Remember, we did the $1,500 per student plus 80% of SPED funding. That includes it there. If this amendment doesn't happen, those schools are taking that money, spending that money, and not reducing their taxes. So we need to make sure that that happens. That has to happen. Our valuations on ag has gone skyrocketed. Some of it's because people in Lincoln Omaha, absentee landowners now state come in and buy our land at high prices. That's just driven our valuations and our taxes out of control. So with that, I do oppose IPP motion. I yield the rest of my time to Senator Kay. Senator Kay.
Thank you, Senator Bostman. Senator Decay, you have 2 minutes, 5 seconds.
Question.
The question's out of order. You can't speak to the turn. Next in the queue is Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for a ruling on that. I appreciate it. Senator DeBoer was mentioning the property taxes are too high. She's correct. But she left out a couple other things. Income tax is too high as well. And then the most regressive tax of all should go away, and that's inheritance tax. So what I'm trying to say is the whole tax system needs to be revamped. And so we haven't talked a whole lot about a fix. We've talked about a Band-Aid on an amputation, which is what we have done for 57 years. So those of you that will be going on next year, you will get an opportunity to put another Band-Aid on another limb that's been amputated. It will mean nothing. So I'm gonna speak a little bit about the sales tax on services and those things that you consume. And I'm going to use this example because it's the easiest one to bring up. We're going to tax gross real estate commissions at 5.5%. Then the person who receives those commissions will then have to file income tax on the remainder. And if you're in a corporation, an LLC, you may pay a significant increase in taxation on that commission. And it could well be 10, 15%. And many have said, well, wait a minute, the consumption tax that you're proposing would have a consumption tax on real estate commissions on a home that's purchased for you to live in. That is correct. The difference is there will be no income tax and no property tax. That's the difference. And so we've nibbled around the edges for 57 years, and we keep getting the same thing we've always gotten, and we wonder what happened. So they took out the ag equipment and the equipment for manufacturing to pay a tax. That was a good move. But it doesn't solve the issue that is before us. And we've heard numerous people tell us about issues that people have by not being able to pay their taxes and having to sell their home or leave the state. This is not a fix. This may be the best thing we can get in a special session, but I'm going to tell you that it has consequences that we don't understand completely yet. And we won't understand that until we implement it. And so if you haven't, and I would assume that most people in this room have not, taken the time to analyze what the real fix is, and that's the EPIC option consumption tax, because I would say the vast majority has never even looked at it. We continue to have conversations about Epic taking away local control. The original bill that we had introduced here was going to do exactly the same thing, but that wasn't taking away local control because they introduced it. Then they said, you can't have all the money come to Lincoln and we'll never get it back. And their response to that was, because that's what they claim Epic does, their response was, we'll write the statute in such a way that the money has to come back. That's exactly what we've been trying to do with Epic, but they don't take a look at it. And so you can't have it both ways, all right?
1 minute.
For 100 years, the state collected all the property tax and sent it back. 100 years. They did it before computers, before ACH, before all of those electronic transfers that we have now, and they did it. We can do it again, but only if our taxes get high enough that people actually say it's time for a fix instead of a Band-Aid on amputation. That's exactly what we did before. That's exactly what we're doing now, and we will do this again and again. There's only one answer, and there's only one solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Decay, you're recognized to speak.
Question.
Question has been called. Do I see 5 hands? I do. The question is, shall debate cease? All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. There's been a request to place the House under call. The question is, shall the House go under call? All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
23 ayes, 4 nays, place House under call.
The House is not placed under call. The House is under call. The House is under call. Senators, please record your presence. Those unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. The House is under call. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. Senator Duncan, please return to the chamber and record your presence. The House is under call. All unexcused members are now present. Members, the question is, shall debate cease? All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. There's been a request for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar, voting yes. Senator Albright, voting yes. Senator Arch, voting yes. Senator Armendariz, voting yes. Senator Ballard, voting yes. Senator Blood, Voting no, Senator Boston. Voting yes, Senator Bostar. Not voting, Senator Bostelman. Voting yes, Senator Brandt. Voting yes, Senator Brewer. Voting yes, Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting no, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Not voting, Senator Clements. Voting yes, Senator Conrad. Voting no, Senator Day. Senator DeBoer. Not voting, Senator DeKay. Voting yes, Senator Dorn. Voting yes, Senator Dover. Voting yes, Senator Dungan. Voting no, Senator Erdman. Voting yes, Senator Frederickson. Not voting, Senator Holleran. Voting yes, Senator Hansen. Voting yes, Senator Hardin. Voting yes, Senator Holcroft. Voting yes, Senator Hughes. Voting yes, Senator Hunt. Voting no, Senator Ibach. Voting yes, Senator Jacobson. Voting yes, Senator Kauth. Voting yes, Senator Linehan. Voting yes, Senator Lippincott. Voting yes, Senator Lowe. Voting yes, Senator McDonald. Voting yes, Senator McKinney. Voting no, Senator Meyer. Voting yes, Senator Mosier. Voting yes, Senator Merman. Voting yes, Senator Raybold. Voting no, Senator Reapy. Not voting, Senator Sanders. Voting yes, Senator Slama. Voting yes, Senator Vargas. Voting no, Senator Von Gillern. Voting yes, Senator Walls. Not voting, Senator Wayne. Senator Wayne. Voting no, Senator Wishart. Not voting. Vote is 32 ayes, 9 ayes, Mr. President, to cease debate.
Debate does cease. Senator Linehan, you're recognized to close on your motion and waive. Members, the question is the motion to indefinitely postpone. There's been a request for roll call vote. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar. Voting yes, Senator Albright. Voting yes, Senator Arch. Voting no, Senator Armendariz. Voting no, Senator Ballard. Voting no, Senator Blood. Voting no, Senator Boston. Voting no, Senator Bostar. Not voting, Senator Bostelman. Voting no, Senator Brandt. Voting no, Senator Brewer. Voting no, Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting yes, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Not voting, Senator Clements. Voting no, Senator Conrad.
Yes.
Voting yes, Senator Day. Senator DeBoer. Voting yes, Senator DeKay. Voting no, Senator Dorn. Voting no, Senator Dover. Voting no, Senator Dungan. Voting yes, Senator Erdman. Voting no, Senator Frederickson. Voting no, Senator Holleran. Voting no, Senator Hansen. Voting no, Senator Hardin. Voting no, Senator Holcroft. Voting no, Senator Hughes. Voting no, Senator Hunt. Voting yes, Senator Ibach. Voting no, Senator Jacobson. Voting no, Senator Kauth. Voting no, Senator Linehan. Voting no, Senator Lippincott. Voting no, Senator Lowe. Voting no, Senator McDonald. Voting no, Senator McKinney. Voting yes, Senator Meyer. Voting no, Senator Mosier. Voting no, Senator Merman. Voting no, Senator Raybold. Voting yes, Senator Reapy. Not voting, Senator Sanders. Voting no, Senator Slama. Voting yes, Senator Vargas. Voting no, Senator Von Gillern. Voting no, Senator Walls. Not voting, Senator Wayne. Not voting, Senator Wishart. Not voting, Senator Albright. Voting no. Vote is 9 ayes, 33 nays, Mr. President, to indefinitely postpone the bill.
The motion to postpone fails. I raise the call. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh would move to reconsider the vote just taken on MO 130.
Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I keep messing up. I keep saying good morning when we're here in the afternoon, but good morning, colleagues. I rise in opposition to LB 34 and the pending committee amendment. I am frustrated by the fact that calling the question continues to happen. The motion to indefinitely postpone was a serious motion. It wasn't a motion to just delay tactics. It was a serious motion to indefinitely postpone. And I am 4 or 5 down in the queue, and I've been sitting here for 2 hours and called the question, and I don't even know how many people are after me. Honestly, the chair should have ruled against calling the question and not put it to a vote of the body. That's what we used to do when there were 2 lines of people in the queue to speak. It would just be ruled not fair, full and fair debate. So just another process thing that has shifted in the last 2 years, which is unfortunate because people shouldn't be able to just show 5 hands every few minutes and circumvent the process of debate. This is a serious bill. This is a serious endeavor, and I take it seriously. I take it very seriously. So here we are on day 11, week, 3. I have been called an obstructionist and unwilling to compromise or work with people, not bringing solutions. So this is first time I've had a bill to actually debate. I spoke on LB4 about my frustrations of the process here once, so I'm not sure how that was being an obstructionist. And everybody else has filed all of these preventative motions. So again, I don't know how I was being an obstructionist, but apparently people knew what was in my heart and my head. I introduced a bill. And it's a bill that I don't particularly like, but I've introduced it several times. It's an increase in the tobacco tax, in the cigarette tax. And the reason I don't like it, because I do believe that it is a tax, a regressive tax on poor people. But the reason that I introduce it is because the studies have shown that a significant increase in tobacco tax improves health outcomes and ultimately will save the state millions of dollars in health care for cancer. So that's why I introduced the tobacco tax. Now, no one ever on the committee talked to me about the tobacco tax and this bill. Asked me if it was in this bill, where I would be at it. No one asked me. But here's what I say. I oppose the tobacco tax in this bill because it is 72-cent increase. A 72-cent increase only raises revenue on the backs of low-income people. It does nothing for healthcare outcomes. It is just the same as every other regressive tax. This bill, as amended, is a series of tax on low-income individuals in Nebraska across the state in every district. It does nothing for renters. It does nothing for the working poor. It is a property tax relief for property owners. And even for property owners, you have to be wealthy for this to make a difference to you. Now it's got an earned child tax credit in it, maybe. I think it does. I don't actually know because the bill has changed so many times, but I believe it does. So you also have to have a child to not basically be paying more in taxes than you were before. It's a bold endeavor. It is a worthy endeavor to solve the property tax problem that we have in Nebraska, but you cannot do it on the backs of the working poor of Nebraska. That is unconscionable. It's just unconscionable. And there are real solutions. And when I am hearing Democrats specifically never bring real solutions, that is a bold-faced lie. The 6 years that I have served in this legislature, every single year, Democrats bring solutions and they don't get out of committee. They don't get any consideration because they help poor people and not rich people. Those are the solutions you should be looking at. How do we lift people out of poverty? How do we raise our revenue base? By lifting people out of poverty and not giving the wealthiest the biggest cuts. That's what we should be focused on. Mr. President, how much time do I have?
4 minutes, 10 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the afternoon, after the lunch break, I'm going to be coming back to this body with information about our budget and LB 2 and 3 and how we got to LB 2 and 3. And no matter what we do or don't do today, it's not just about the taxes, it's about the budget and the pay for. And I have got to tell you, friends, colleagues, it's not good and it's not pretty, and we should all be concerned. I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to Senator McKinney.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator McKinney, you have 3 minutes, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. I think we definitely should reconsider that vote. We should reconsider our time here because I think it's being wasted. Primarily because I keep hearing people talk about we need to do something for all Nebraskans, but everything I've heard thus far is not including all Nebraskans. Renters are not being included in these conversations. As much as it's being spent that renters are going to benefit from any of these bills, that's just not the reality. Landlords are still going to raise rents. Renters are not going to see any relief. And when I think about my district, 60% of my district rents. Majority of the property owners in my district don't live in my district and don't live in this state. So that relief is not going to benefit my district at all. So why would I vote for this? There is no inclusion of a renter tax credit, renter help, anything in any of these conversations, but renters are going to get help. And the funny thing about all of this conversation, before we got here, I saw an article, I think it was in Nebraska Examiner, and I forget which senators were talking about individuals who lease property to farm in Western Nebraska won't see no benefit from this plan. I'm working with that same philosophy in urban Nebraska, where no matter how much you try to spin it, that property owners are going to get relief and they're going to somehow pass it down to renters. It's not going to happen. The market is the market. And if we don't give relief to renters, it's never going to happen. And we did introduce solutions and plans to assist with paying for these type of things. We should legalize marijuana. That could bring in potentially $150 million, but y'all don't want to entertain that conversation, which is wild to me. If we're coming here and you guys are saying put everything on the table, but you don't want to consider this, but you're saying put everything on the table. We need to reduce our prisons. We need to give people second chances. We need to allow people to discharge from parole early. There are solutions and there are things to address these issues in a more equitable and more humane way to think about everybody. But when you stand up and say this is a plan for all Nebraskans, I'm missing a lot because you're not considering renters. There was a presentation talking about modest income people. What about the low income people? What about the people on disability, the people on fixed incomes? When you're talking about relief, and then you're talking about raising sales taxes, which is going to burden those people. This is not a plan for all Nebraskans, and just be honest about it, and we could go on with our lives, but just saying that just to get people to support this is crazy to me. Just be honest. It's not a plan for all Nebraskans. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Senator Hughes, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to talk about LB 34 and specifically the school funding piece. Thank you to the Revenue Committee for working on this. I know a lot of time has been spent on this bill. So as far as the school part, I am happy to see a move toward a phased-in approach of lowering the levy cap. Starting out at 40 cents does leave, or 40% leaves around 100 schools with the potential levy over that 0.40. It also has 8 schools less than the 10-cent levy. In current LB 34, there is language that the state would make the 100 schools right without making them go to a vote of the people. I also would like to see a base levy adjustment, meaning that there's a line in the sand that schools don't go below. Maybe that's 20% or some other amount. I fundamentally believe that some local property tax should be used to pay for local K through 12 schools. I also think an important role that we need to have is to make sure that our levies get closer together for all schools. And I'll just use an example in my district. I've got Centennial Public Schools and Seward Public Schools that are side by side. They almost share the same tax base. Centennial has around 400 and some students, and Seward has around 1,500 students. So the tax levy for Seward is more than double for the school than Centennial, and that's because they have a higher number of students. But when you've got ground or property or homes just almost nearby that are double taxed just because in the school district they're at, that's the problem with a wide variety in levies. So the closer that we can get those together, the better. When I started working on LB 9 to lower the levy cap, we realized that when you drop the cap down, schools would lose funding from their special building fund. This allows schools the ability to maintain and repair school buildings. In LB 34, it takes that building fund outside of the max cap, and instead of leaving it at 14 cents, moves it to 10 cents. There's a couple things that are missing from the bill, and a big one is a fail-safe. We need a safety net for our public schools. If we as a legislative body fail to provide the funding promised to these schools, then they have to be able to levy a local property tax. I would also actually like to see a property taxpayer safety net, where if the schools don't get funding from the state, have to turn around and levy the local taxpayer, then I would like the local taxpayer to be able to get an income tax credit for the part that they had to pay. In all, there are several good things about LB 34 regarding schools, and there are several things that really need to be worked on. Bottom line, it has been over the course of 20 years that as local property values have increased, the state has pulled more and more of their funding from those schools because those schools had the means to pay for them. I am very pleased that we're addressing this, and regardless of what happens this special session, the ball has started rolling, and we will come back in January to help push it further. It took 20 years to get here, and I look forward to coming up with a long-term plan that will address this responsibly and reasonably in the years to come. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Senator Lippincott, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, sir. In the Air Force, and I'm sure it's true in the Navy, the Army, the Marine Corps, we always start off every mission stating the mission objective. And the mission objective for our summer session, our special session here, obviously, is reducing property tax. As a matter of fact, 74% of Republicans polled throughout the state say that they're for a decrease in property taxes, and 64% of Democrats also have agreed on this issue. The 30,000-foot view of property tax, we need to remember that it is a local tax which is used to meet the needs of all the different local government functions found in your local county. And of that pie, 2/3 of that pie is for education, your public school. So sometimes we forget about that. And this bill, what it would do is it would address 80% of that 2/3, because that 80% goes for salaries, for the personnel, for teachers, administrators, custodians, everybody who works at the school. 80% of that 2/3 of your property tax budget. That's considerable. If I may ask Senator Von Gillering a couple of quick questions, just for clarification, because I have received a lot of questions from folks back home.
Senator Von Gillering, would you yield to some questions?
Yes.
I would like you just to confirm the tax on agricultural equipment that has been removed from this bill. Is that correct?
Yes, and along with that, the tax on machinery also.
Machinery.
Excuse me, not the tax, the exemption, the elimination of the exemptions have been removed from the bill.
Okay, so if a farmer goes in to buy a brand new tractor, what does that mean?
means that they are not charged sales tax on that piece of equipment.
Beautiful. That's a great thing. Then I also wanted to ask you a question regarding, we know that locally levies are used to bring revenue in for schools, for instance. And what this bill does is it reduces the levies that will be charged locally. And that confirmed for me that that will be stepped down year by year, and also that the schools will not be shorted, have their funds reduced. Is that correct?
Correct. The levy steps down over a 3-year period and initially goes to 40, from $1.05, it goes to 40 cents, then it goes to 35, and then it goes to 30-cent levy, with obviously that funding being made up by the state. And there is language in the bill that says that a school district cannot receive less than they received in the previous year. So for some districts where they're fearful that the resetting of the levy will cost them money, that is not the case.
Okay, good. A lot of superintendents have been raising the red flag on that. And again, just to confirm, these schools will not receive less money. I've had superintendents contact me. We're going to be receiving $700,000 less with this bill than previously. So that is not true. It's
Correct.
inaccurate.
Correct. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, sir. And also just local school control will not be removed. It will maintain with local control. The state will not be running the strings on the puppet.
In the hearings, what we heard was that the school districts wanted to maintain a certain level of funding, and they translated that to local control. There's nothing in none of the bills. Thank you, Mr. President. There's nothing in any of the bills that have been presented for property tax relief that would have eliminated decision-making by local school boards or anything like that. And this is similar in that there's no impact to decision-making by school boards, but many of the school districts testified in the revenue hearings that they felt that maintaining a certain minimum level of property tax taking within their district represented local control. And this bill, actually, many of them said 25 cents was the right number, and this is obviously above that, so they should be quite satisfied with their level of local control based on their definition.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. May I ask a question of Senator Kauth, please?
Senator Kauth, would you yield? 16 seconds left, Senator.
Yes.
Quick summation on the homestead, the difference with the homestead issue.
So there have been some people who already were kicked off homestead exemption because their valuations rose. We passed the bill this year to make it going forward. Thank you. They don't have to.
Thank you, Senators Kauth and Senator Hansen. You are next in the queue.
I can next. Thank you, Mr. President. All right, so I want to shed a little light on the argument that this will not help those who rent as opposed to own property. I had my staff spend many days, I'm surprised no other senators have done this, or we haven't seen a whole lot of information about this. We actually did a survey of those who own rental properties. A lot of them were in Omaha and Lincoln, actually, and surrounding areas, and what their thoughts were about property taxes. And so I just want to read off a couple, the summation of what we found out with asking a lot of these property owners certain questions. So one of the ones was, how many properties do you own, does your organization own in Nebraska? And it was varied. Most of them were more than 20 properties, but we had a lot that were between 11 and 20 properties, 3 and 5 properties, and even down to 1 to 2 properties. So these are individuals who own rental units around and in Omaha and Lincoln. In the last 5 years, how much have you increased rents in response to an increase in property taxes? Overwhelmingly, at least 50% of them said we increased them at least between 5 and 10% because of increase in property taxes. Another quarter said between 10 and 20% they've raised rates because of increased property taxes. And there's also some who said by more than 20% they increased rental rates because of property taxes. So when I said this yesterday, if we don't address property taxes, rental rates will continue to go up exponentially. Now, I'm not going to deny when people get up here and say they're not going to lower their properties, they're not going to lower their rental rates, and I agree. And we actually asked that question. How much would rents decrease if property taxes decreased by 50%? 62% of them said not at all. Not surprised. We also had 25% say they'd lower them by 5 to 10%. We had some say by 10 to 20%, and also some by 20%. They would lower their rental rates, or at least not or decrease in the amount that they raise them by that much. That goes to the person who owns the property or who rents the property. The person who is renting that apartment, who's renting that condo, they see the benefit. Have increased property taxes influenced your decision to make property improvements or renovations? 26.7% said moderately, 20% said significantly, 26.7% said extremely. So many of these property owners are unable to renovate or improve the property because of high property taxes. So now you have people living in these rental units and they can't get certain improvements that they need because of high property taxes. Have you passed on the cost of increased property taxes to your tenants? And if so, by what percentage on average? 33.3% said 5 to 10%. Have you passed on the cost of increased property taxes to your tenants? A third said 5 to 10%. About 30% said 5%. About 30% said by more than 20%. They're passing this entire cost on to the people who rent. So when I get up here and I hear people say that people who rent, this is not going to benefit them all, actually it makes it worse for them. I don't know if anybody else actually contacted the people who own these rental units and asked them. They are all saying the exact opposite. When deciding the rental market rate, how important are property taxes? 62.5% said extremely important. 12.5, very important. 12.5, moderately. And 12.5 said slightly. None of them said not important.
1 minute.
Just want to provide a little context when we hear this argument on the floor. Seems like a lot of subjective opinions and no objective opinions. So when we hear that this bill only benefits massive landowners or the millionaires and billionaires, it benefits people who rent in the state of Nebraska. So let's think about that when we think of our constituents, not just those who own property, but those who rent as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. This was supposed to be my first time speaking on the floor in the regular order of the queue. So I originally was rising to support the IPP motion for LB 34, but now I rise to support the motion to reconsider the vote so that we can vote again on LB 34 to indefinitely postpone. Facts. Let's deal in facts. It's not a fact that property owners will give the money somehow to their renters. It's a hope and a dream, but not a fact. It is a fact that there is no direct correlation between this bill and giving some sort of relief to renters. There is a direct correlation through increased property taxes and rent, but there is no facts of this bill that ensure that renters receive some support as well. Senator McKinney introduced a bill that would give senators, well, some of us are renters, but would give renters direct relief. So that is a fact for my dear colleague, Senator Hansen. Going through this bill, I'm going to be honest, I did not spend my evening reading 115 plus pages last night. I have read various iterations of this bill a couple of times, and I decided last night to put my kids to bed instead. So I have been reading over the committee statement, which to committee staff, kudos, great job. I love a good committee statement. And it's 12 pages. Oh, the committee statement is 12 pages. Much easier to go through a 12-page committee statement than the bill. But it does list out very clearly where things are changing and where there are exemptions and where there are not exemptions. Now, one exemption that's been brought up, or eliminating this exemption, is a tax on candy and soft drinks. And I know people like a good sin tax, but let me tell you about how this would work just for my family, just my family. So I have 3 kids. They're all grade school aged, and they also play soccer. And so we sometimes bring snacks to school for the class, or sometimes just send them with a snack. And then there's snacks after a soccer game. And then there's, oftentimes maybe a juice box or a sports drink after a soccer game as well. So the snacks that we send would be taxed under the candy and soft drinks because they don't contain wheat. Because they are gluten-free, our snacks would be taxed. But if we got, say, Oreos, those wouldn't be taxed. But our made good bars,
1 minute,
that are like a healthy vegetable-infused Rice Krispie bar, those would be taxed. And those are made in an allergy-free, nut-free facility, so I know that it's approved to go to school. I don't have to worry about any school allergens for other kids. That would be taxed. And I would notice, because I get a monthly shipment of these snacks to my house every month, because it is the only way I can get one of my kids to eat any source of vegetables. Not the best source of vegetables, but at least it's something. So I would notice that. And I would notice it on my grocery bill if I bought snacks for a soccer game when I was buying groceries and there was a tax just for the snacks. I noticed that there's a tax just for alcohol when I'm at the grocery store. I would notice that there was a tax
That's
just
your
for
time,
snacks.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Blood, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, friends all, I stand opposed to the reconsideration, but in favor of the IPP motion. With that said, I didn't know we were going to have a dog and pony show when we started talking about this months ago, but clearly that's what this is going to be. And I find it really telling when people stage things to basically oppress the voices of others by saying that we're trying to stop something, we're taking cheap shots. This bill's not perfect, and there's many things I don't support, but hey, let's push this through, which I've heard over and over again for 8 years. If you want to bring an amendment, bring it today and we'll fix it. Well, baloney. Because many of us approach this like we approach our puzzles. When I do a puzzle, I do the outside frame first. So I looked at what bills I knew were coming, and the first thing I saw is that we needed more revenue. We didn't need more taxes to fix this problem. We needed more revenue. Then I looked at the other people that rarely get direct property tax relief. Our renters, some of our farmers and ranchers, we need to do better. And so I made sure that when I brought things forward, it started including all of these things that I was seeing that were not being addressed. And I didn't see that being addressed when the governor, who I know everybody says is great, he gave us this huge plate of things we could choose from, and we got to whittle it down. Well, you can also look at it that he threw mud at the wall and whatever sticks stuck, and that's what we're stuck with. Because there was no real science behind it. It was just like, let's do this and this and this and this. That's not good government. I brought forward circuit breaker bill that would give property tax relief. to individuals and renters and farmers and ranchers. I brought forward income brackets, additional ones for people that are wealthy, because I did a survey, which I shared with the Revenue Committee, that in Nebraska, they want us to do a better job of taxing the wealthy. And don't tell me they're going to leave the state because you don't have evidence that shows that. I love when Senator Michaela Cavanaugh uses the F word, facts. Show me the facts, not your opinion. And then I was really glad when Senator Albright brought up the pink cards, because now we can talk about unfunded mandates. Because since Ben Nelson was governor, who warned us that if we keep passing down mandates to our political subdivisions, our property taxes were going to continue to rise. And we had interim study after interim study and bill after bill. Senator Deb Fisher, Republican, Senator Justin Wayne, Senator Sue Crawford, Senator Carol Blood. But you don't want to do that. You want to be able to spend the money the way you want to spend the money, like on a canal or a lake, which I'm not saying is right or wrong. You guys don't want to truly be beholden to the taxpayers, because if you did, my unfunded mandates legislative resolution that would go to the voters, which you know would pass, would also be on the floor. My bill was the first bill out with 8-0 vote, by the way, for the third time in a row. You can't keep talking about property taxes as a way to tax different things. You have to look at it as, how do we generate revenue, and what do we know is the underlying foundation of why our property taxes are high? I became a governor because I believe in freedom. Oh my God, a Democrat that believes in freedom. I don't believe that. We've become a nanny state. Thank you.
1 minute.
And as a nanny state now, we think it's our job to start capping local government. The CPI plus growth is going to restrict the revenue that they need to run the government. When you start taxing things like Keno, you start taking away our community betterment fund that we are going to be dependent on. The municipalities, the county that I represent, do a very good job when it comes to per capita spending. And as we grow and other counties grow, you are limiting that growth, and you are limiting potential services that people value, like snow removal, like their roads, like our parks. You can't keep looking for things to dip out of. You've got to generate income. You've got to generate revenue. And with exception, and I am appreciative of my delivery fee, a lot of good ideas were left on the table.
That's your time, Senator. Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Merman, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. And I would like to also, as many have done, thank the governor for making this property tax relief a priority of his administration. I would like to thank everyone that's on the task force that met all summer. Thank Senator Linehan and the Revenue Committee for their work on it. And of course, thank pretty much most senators here that truly want property tax relief. And most importantly, as Senator Brandt did, I would like to thank property taxpayers in this state for shouldering more of the burden of taxes in this state that really should be done with a fair tax system in this state. No matter how we come up with the ideas for a solution, you know, with the way the governor has proposed with this special session, it'd be a big step in the right direction. We need to rebalance our tax structure in this state. I know shift is has become kind of a dirty word, but I like to say rebalancing, because our tax structure is completely out of balance in this state. As has been mentioned before, only 2.3 billion of our revenue comes from sales tax, 3.7 billion from income tax, and 5.3 billion from property tax. So as you can see from those numbers, our balance, our tax structure is completely out of balance. The people that have been working on this are the people that would always be working on it, including the whole legislature. We keep hearing, well, we can't solve this problem in just 2 weeks or whatever the special session, whatever time that takes. Well, that's not true. When I ran for the legislature, it's been unbelievably about 7 years ago now, the number one economic issue in this state was the out-of-control property taxes. And it's only become even more urgent in those 7 years. It's not overstating the problem to say it's a crisis right now. And we need to do something to relieve that crisis, because we are forcing people out of the state, especially elderly, and also we are preventing or making it very difficult for young people, young couples to own a house or buy a farm in this state, or even rent in this state. I think the package that's been put together is a very good package. The total package does control spending with the caps. I know that's really important. We can't provide property tax relief without assurance that whatever rebalancing with sales tax won't be eaten up with property taxes in a very short time. So it's very important that we are controlling spending with the caps that are necessary in this legislation.
1 minute.
And thank you. It also assures that increased future revenue does go to property tax relief. And that's very important. The revenues have come in above expectations. So we have been able to put a lot of that revenue to property tax relief thus far, but a lot more needs to be done. And it's been mentioned, 122-page bill. Well, when you're restructuring the whole tax system in the Nebraska, property taxes, it's going to be a big bill. 122 pages really isn't that much with this big of an issue. And not everyone is going to agree with every line in the 122 pages, but we've got to work together. We've got to bite the bullet and give and take a little bit to really get big things done.
That's
and
your time, Senator.
I have more to add, but I'll do it.
Thank you, Senator Merman. Senator Oldcroft, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of LB 34 and opposed to the IPP and the reconsideration. And I have a question for Senator Linehan, if she'll yield.
Senator Linehan, would you yield to some questions?
Certainly, thank you.
Senator Linehan, how many pages did this end up being?
122 pages, Senator Holcroft, of which 81 actually had changes. So as we know here who read bills, when you go through a new bill, you look at the underlines and the crossouts. That's what you have to pay attention to. So there were 81 pages that had changes. And I would guess, because I read it yesterday in about a half an hour, that you would probably half of the 81 pages or less than maybe 2 or 3 lines.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. And first of all, I would like to join others in thanking the governor for bringing this forward to the unicameral and calling us here. I think he feels the pain of the citizens of Nebraska, and honestly would like to see property tax relief. I mean, he really did yeoman's work in going around the state and getting people's inputs, and provided us with a starting point, which has changed some since we first came together. But I think we have a place to go forward. 2 things are, and I also want to thank the Revenue Committee. I mean, they really have done yeoman's work. So one time I was kind of glad not to be on the Revenue Committee, on the Judiciary Committee. So they have really worked overtime. Well, two things are true, I think, two facts. Number one, if we do nothing, property taxes will increase significantly if we do nothing. And if you're a renter, your rent is going to go up significantly. I mean, we believe falsely, I think, that renters do not benefit by reduction in property tax, but landlords do not pay property tax for renters. They simply pass that along to the renter. I mean, there are good landlords and bad landlords, but even a good landlord is, he's not going to pay the property tax just out of the goodness of his heart. He's going to pass that along as a cost. So even for renters, if we do not pass property tax, they will see rent increase significantly in the coming years and months. So, you know, most people, I don't think, have a good idea how much they pay in property tax, because if you're a young person and you're just buying a new house, it's all rolled into your monthly mortgage payment. I mean, probably now, I remember back when I was paying mine, it was, you know, maybe 10, 20%, but I think you were probably getting closer to maybe 30, 40, maybe even 50% of your monthly mortgage payment is your property tax. And you just don't see it. You just, you know, you have that direct payment from your checking account to the bank, and includes your insurance and your principal payment. But it's just, I don't think people have a real good idea of what they're paying in property tax. So I would encourage those to go ahead and take a look at that annual statement that you get from the county treasurer. And I have mine here in front of me, and I just like to express a couple numbers between 2022 and 2023. Okay, the valuation on my house.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. The property tax or my assessment on my house, entities who levy against that value. And my levy is on my house went up 17%. My levy went down 1.6%. That means those political entities are getting an increase in their budgets of about 15%. 15% increase in budget here if they do nothing. Now, they did lower it by 1.6%, but my value went up 17%. That's what we have to limit here, is the levy. The levies. We have to reduce the levies to get to property tax.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Conrad, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I rise in opposition to I guess the hijacking of LB 34, which I was an original co-sponsor of in good faith with my friend Senator Brewer, as one smart idea that we could bring forward to try and stop how to put our heads together, not only in this body and with the governor, but also with our partners in local government to address the larger complexities in our tax code, our budget, and school funding. So I stand by my co-sponsorship of Senator Brewer's bill originally. I do have significant policy concerns with the Revenue Committee amendment that has been advanced. And let me be clear that my opposition to the plan that essentially is Governor Pillen's plan that the Revenue Committee put forward is a sincerely held policy disagreement. The goal we have all agreed is laudable and important, to provide property tax relief to Nebraskans, and I would add who most need property tax relief. But we have a fundamental, sincerely held difference of opinion in regards to how to do that. And I simply disagree with sales tax-based approaches, which are regressive and which hit working families and seniors and local businesses the hardest. I think that kind of tax increase and tax shift is just a bad deal for Nebraska, and it's particularly a bad deal for my district. So I want to, before we get into the specifics, and I actually think we've been having a really, really good debate this morning, and am grateful that we actually have a bill on the floor here on the 11th day of the special session to address the issues that we were called together for. And Senator Von Gillerin is exactly right. Myself and other senators put in almost 100 different bills and constitutional amendments this session, which show not obstructionism, but a seriousness of purpose in bringing forward good ideas and all ideas, as apparently we were invited to do so, saying we need all hands on decks to address this. But those other ideas, whether they were to raise revenue, address new revenue streams, or no-cost solutions, have not been advanced from the committee. So this is the only plan that we have available to us. And at the heart of this plan is that quintessential reverse Robin Hood. And it leaves renters with nothing. I have one of the highest percentages of renters in my district in the state. But then it also asks low-income working families to pay more for almost 70 roughly goods and services that are not previously taxed, to then assess taxes on those. So we're not getting relief. We're paying more on those sales taxes. And then additionally, we're seeing less services for the most vulnerable with the mean-spirited budget cuts that are moving forward. And we're seeing less services on the local level for the most vulnerable because of the caps that would be in place, while also risking our schools. So it's a lot to get our heads around, but at the heart of it, before we get into specifics, those are the things that I'm most concerned about. And, you know, I think it goes without saying that while, again, well-intentioned, the public safety exemptions from the cap do help to advance our shared public safety goals. Number one, thank you, Mr. President, we're exempting law enforcement from the risks of a risky plan. Number two, when you make that exemption, those caps hit hardest on mental health, libraries, public health, roads, libraries, pools. And when you take that against the mean-spirited budget cuts, particularly that come out of HHS, and ask low-income folks to pay more and give them no benefit in regards to the tax relief, it's just a bad deal for my district and most working families in Nebraska. And that doesn't mean that I don't like Governor Pillen or like Senator Linehan. It's just my serious read in my head and in my heart, talking to my district, listening to emails, going to town halls, looking at the research, that it's a sincerely held philosophical difference about how to solve the problem. So I hope that we get a vote on this amendment, which would be one of the most significant tax increases in history. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Senator McKinney, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield my time to Senator Wayne.
Senator Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator McKinney. Obviously, the second day I was here, I dropped a sine die motion and nobody voted for it. And today we're just doing a lot of posturing in both sides. I tweeted this morning that Republicans preach of smaller government and personal freedoms, but impose strict controls on how people live. Democrats claim to support the working class, but their help often reeks of toxic charity and elitism, causing more harm than good. Here's the reality. Yesterday, I went to Walmart. Then I talked to some people at a Mega Saver. You don't know who that is? It's a gas station. And the conversation was really, really simple. Would you take increased candy versus no taxes on your electricity? Not one person said no. In fact, most of the people thought they were already paying taxes on their candy. Not one person said no, because people are paying anywhere from $8 to $16 a month, some as high as $24 just in taxes, and that's a whole lot of candy you have to buy to make that up. I asked the same question, what about increased price for your alcohol? Somebody had some vodka versus a renter's tax credit or a renter's deduction. Oh, hell yeah, was the response. I don't get any break right now for paying rent. That's a great idea. I know your alcohol is going to go up. That's okay. That's my choice. Where I live and having a place to live is not my choice. It's a need, not a want. I'm not for this bill, but if we're going to have a real conversation, let's be honest. We get up and say you're not for cuts, but you just said you co-sponsor and support Brewer's bill, the original LB 34, which is a freeze. That is a hard cap. Matter of fact, that's a cut. Because if you can't get increased valuations and you're stopped right at the same property value, the cost of inflation goes up. The city's cost goes up. They lose money because it's stopped. I love the idea of a circuit breaker. The problem is our current property tax credit isn't working, and a circuit breaker is a credit. And if you look at where it's not working, it's mainly Omaha and Lincoln. Some crazy number of 60% didn't claim it. So trying to go to a deduction or actual on your statement, a credit on your statement actually helps everybody. Again, I'm not for this bill. I think there's some critical things that we need to fix. I don't think they'll be fixed right now because neither side really wants to move off of their idea. It's their idea and we can't change. But if you support a hard freeze for 2 years, then you can't say you're against caps because that's actually worse than a cap. There's no growth for inflation. There's no growth at all for anything. The city of Omaha put in their fiscal note, it cost them $10 million if we did Brewer's bill next year. Let's be honest and have a real conversation. And if we can't, then let's just go home. There is a fundamental problem. Think about it. We're taxing sales tax on gross incomes. That's harder than a net income. You don't get to take into account my deductions, my cost of running my business. It's a higher percentage. That sales tax is going to hit everyone a little harder. Would I like to get rid of the exemptions? Yes. One of my hard no's is haircuts. Haircuts are a need. You want to send your kids to school, they need haircuts. You want to go to a job interview, you want to come in looking clean versus getting your nails done. That is a want. I like a pedicure. If I want to do it, I should pay more. And if I got to pay a little 5 to 7 cents on that to make sure somebody can get a renter's tax credit, that's my job as being able to afford that want. So I just want a real honest conversation. We're being inconsistent, and you know who's going to hurt in all this? The renters and the property owners. So let's think about what we're saying, let's think about what we're really doing and try to come to a real solution. Our ideas aren't always the best. Sometimes you got to navigate. If we could figure out how the circuit breaker works better than our current tax credit form, I'm for it. I like the idea. But we've proven over the last 4 years, credits don't work, Senator, for working people. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Dorn, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. Trying to think through comments I was going to make, and many people made it this morning. Really like to thank the governor for bringing us all together to have the discussion on property taxes. The Revenue Committee for all the work they did. My gosh, 68 bills in this special session that they ought to get some kind of, I don't know, Olympic medal or something because the amount of work you put in. Also their committee for the committee statement and such. Really want to thank all of them. Just been trying to listen to all the discussion this morning. A lot of very, very good points made. My gosh, Senator Wayne there, I think a key point of his is many of us, we are so entrenched on this or this has to be in the bill. And if it's not in the bill, I cannot support it. Or if this is in the bill, that's the other side, the other party, I'm not going to support it either. So we need to, I call it, come together and work through many of those things. But what I've also learned is, and several people, especially Senator DeBoer mentioned it this morning, I've been here 6 years. Merman's been here 6 years. Senator Hansen's been here 6 years. We've all been part of this. I call it property tax discussion. I look at some senators that are only been here for a couple years, and I go, man, if you learn as much as what we learned in 6 years, by the time you're like the last group that's leaving here, we're going to have 15 senators that are gone. They've been a part of this discussion for 8 years, and the effort and the time we put in every session, every year for property tax relief. I am for LB 34, oppose the other two motions, but when I talked about it during regular session, I talked about an individual in my district, lives in Hickman, build apartment buildings. We talk about property tax relief. He built those apartments in 2018. In 6 years, the property tax had doubled on him. He went from paying 1 month of total rent to pay property taxes to 3 months, the way it is now, of total rent to pay the property taxes. He was about a month and a half to pay the property taxes. He went to 3 months of total rent. So when we talk about rentals, his rent people were going to pay more for those increased taxes. So there's so many conversations going on, and so many, this affects this, this affects this. I do like the point that if we do nothing, 100% guarantee that your property taxes will be increasing. You can call it sales tax, we're shifting it or doing whatever, but 100% guarantee your property taxes in the next year or 2 years will be increasing. 3-4 weeks ago, we had a tour, visited some ethanol plants, and Senator Wayne's district, one of the young ladies that's running for that district, and I hope I pronounce her name right, Ashley Spivey, got to have a conversation with her on the bus for a part of the ride back. And I said, how's the election going? What's it like? And she talked about how many houses she'd walked. I think all of us can agree, and many people have mentioned, that this is just a tax break for the rich. Senator Wayne's district, I would not call that a rich district. Her comment to me was, you would not believe how many people talk about property tax relief, and how many doors I've knocked that they are looking forward to, or they're watching and following what the special session will happen for property tax relief. That's in Senator Wayne's district. Those people,
1 minute.
She said, they feel the need for property tax relief. Many of them, she said, talked about what it's doing to price them out of the house. I was going to ask Senator Linehan a question about the county jails. I'll just bring it up. I had an email that said, county jails in here, we're going to pick up so much of the funding, and I talked to Senator Linehan. It doesn't mention anything about the outside prisoners that you sometimes house. The intent of the bill is that they are all going to be, that's going to be part of the package picked up, but it doesn't mention it in there that they are picked up. So that email I got from a county board member said, oh, you're not picking it up. Just wanted to bring that. The last thing I want to leave with this is, the only way we're going to bring down property taxes in this state of Nebraska is by reduce spending, by spending less. The state, the counties,
That's
the
your
cities,
time,
and the
Senator.
schools. Thank you much.
Thank you, Senator Dorn. Senator Vargas, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll also finish or start where Senator Dorn finished, which is, I do believe that one of the best ways that we can get out of this situation is by spending less. There are times where we look at what we're doing in the Appropriations Committee, and I wish we looked at the further context of what's happened over the last more than decade, right? Within a decade. In a decade, if you look at previous Appropriations Committees, we have spent a significant amount more 10 years prior to this year, 10 years. This 10 years, because of the collaboration between past administrations and this administration and with our committee, we have spent significantly less year over year. And because of spending less, we were able to afford a lot of the tax cuts that the majority of the members in this body agreed to. we were able to reduce spending. Now, there are instances where we increase spending. Republicans and Democrats alike increasing bills for base budget appropriations, for programs, for services, for tax credits. And in doing that, that was less revenue that we can do to property tax relief. The Platt Institute continues to put out that our property tax burden is pressing, but as we explore solutions, we emphasize the importance of avoiding higher sales tax rates or taxing business inputs. And in this bill, there's 70 different inputs, goods and services, that are going to be now taxed and are going to be picked up on behalf of individuals in our state to offset for property tax relief for others. That's a fact. That's not a question. It's the reason why I'm against that. What I am supportive of, and I can look my Appropriations Committee members in the face on this, is in committee over the years saying no to more spending within committee insofar as it actually addresses some of the root causes of problems. We shouldn't be harming health and human services. We shouldn't be doing more to make services less. We should be making sure they're available. Because if that continues to be a burden, it's going to be more expensive on people, and they're going to live fewer years, not live as long, and it's going to harm our communities, and it's going to be more expensive in the long run. The reason why I've fought for housing, and I know that myself and Senator Lippincott and Dover have worked on housing, is because if we have more housing stock and it's more affordable and there's more varied, that will lower the market rate, but we don't have as much housing stock right now. Right now in the Midwest, we have the least amount of housing stock per capita in the Midwest versus every other state. Makes it higher. Our valuations keep going up because of that. We have to do more, and this is a future Appropriations Committee issue, with making sure we're making fiscally responsible decisions. Now, here's the bigger issue I have with this is we don't have revenue coming in to offset actually meeting the demands of education or the other aspects of government. I've been in my committees, and I do love my committee members, but I have brought this question of, if we don't have money and sales tax is reduced by 5% because people spend less on these goods and services, are you going to, where are we going to find the money? Where are we going to find the money to then meet the goods and services? If we have a budget deficit request for child welfare, for developmental disability services, for education, and we don't have enough revenue coming in, what will we do? Will you increase revenues or find new revenue sources? Those are on the book right now. People introduced revenue generators and they were not brought forward, not enough of them.
1 minute.
Colleagues, I'm in support of reducing spending, especially for local municipalities. I've said that because I've done a vote of the people for occupation taxes. So I believe vote of the people for increasing spending. I support that personally. I can't speak for anybody else. I also want to try to spend less. And that is the way we've been able to responsibly still meet services and not reduce this burden on the working class by paying more on regressive sales tax. I was supposed to yield more time to my colleague, Senator Dover. I'll yield him a couple seconds. Oh no, he's waving it off now. Never mind. I hope that, and this is in the future for next year, when the body is looking at how much less money we have, and we are projected to have 60 million at least less in this next biennium, right now at this moment, that if we are not willing to look at other revenue generators, also if we're not willing to take a hard look,
Senator. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Vargas. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are some good bills that we are not going to get to. This entire process is to be driven by schedules, and that's a problem. My schedule wasn't accounted for when I got called down here, but we're going to accommodate this session to schedule for failure. We are working a schedule that we all know is going to lead us to the exact thing that many of us don't want us to be at, which is just front loading 1107 and getting out of here. That's what's going to happen, and it's going to leave out many, many Nebraskans. And it's not going to provide real relief to many Nebraskans. because we're focused on few individual schedules. And I know people have commitments next week and the week after that. And what I would propose is a pause. I would propose a pause to have some more conversations. If we believe that this is so important for a special session, that it should be important enough to have real dialogue, and not just with a selected few in a secret committee. I'll give you an example, a bill that I think we should do, that I've talked about it for 7 years, that Senator Brandt brought, LR2CA. If you don't know, one of our problems with property taxes is we have the uniform and proportionality clause in our Constitution. So every time we came up with an idea for a property tax relief that involves some kind of classification, the courts have found it unconstitutional. That's why ag is treated differently, because we had to go out and pass a new constitutional amendment for ag. That's why Dorn's bill, I think, is probably one of the most significant bills that can affect change in Omaha, and we're not going to hear it. We should vote on that bill and the underlying statute that allows it to be on the ballot, and take a pause. We should bring out the gambling, LR3CA, straight up or down vote. If we don't pass it to get it on the ballot, so be it. But if it gets on the ballot, let them vote. And don't make neither one of those conditions upon the rest of the package that we have to put together. But we can do that this week and put those two issues in front. If you don't know why Brandt's bill is so important, commercial and residential are taxed the same. If we can break that out of our Constitution, then the issue in Senator McKinney in my district, where out-of-town people are owning property and are going to get this relief and people who live here won't, we can change how that works by using residential and owner-occupied. That bill is critical. In my first 2 years, I couldn't get Republicans to understand it, so I couldn't move it out of, at the time it was in urban affairs, because uniform and proportionality is a big deal. And he understands that issue and why it's so important. That is a must-have, and a schedule should not dictate that. Gambling, we talk about new revenue. The only thing we're talking about is online. During the College World Series, they literally drove to Carter Lake if they were in a car, and if they weren't in a car, they walked over to the Bob Carey Bridge, got on their phone, and made a bet. Exit 1 in Iowa, look at the maps. It is actually the #1 casino in Iowa. They pull off, get off, make their bets, and come back to Omaha. All that revenue is gone. And for those who are concerned about the social ills, we still have them. And we don't have the money to fund it. So be a true conservative and let people live their lives and take personal responsibility.
1 minute.
Those bills should be on the floor and debated before we even got to this bill, because then that gives that side of no extra revenue, that argument's gone. Schedule shouldn't dictate property tax relief. We deserve more, and so do the Nebraskans. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, your Committee on Appropriations, chaired by Senator Clements, reports Legislative Bill 2 and 3 to general file, both having committee amendments. Additionally, priority motion, Senator Walz would move to recess the body until 1:00 p.m.
Members, you've heard the motion to recess. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Legislature's in recess.